Hello, everybody. I'm not sure if I should do like the ASMR voice. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Storyteller Section. But I don't know. I'm gonna say, hey, welcome. Thank you, everybody, for watching. This is the Storyteller Section of the Out of Order Show, where we go into the background / character creation of my numerous non-player characters, the cast, and as well as the background for their purpose and how you, the audience, can kind of interact about it, have your discussions about certain NPCs or certain plot points. If you want, you can support the Patreon and get this a week early. And usually, most of the time, these are going to be connected to the monthly early access 101 downtime scene, which you can also, at the $10 mark at patreon.com/outofordershow, get access to that. We currently have one episode featuring the NPC we're creating today, and that NPC is a NPC that I like. I actually like the idea of him. So, hello, how y'all doing? So this is going to be the Starting XP episode of my boy Wrath. Now, you look at Wrath and you're like, my God, who in God's green earth would create such a dweeb of an NPC? And you're looking right at him, because I find that most World of Darkness games, there is a sort of unique snowflake aspect to a lot of these characters and NPCs, because, you know, it's only the privileged that can become a werewolf because of descendants and legacy, or, you know, have the mind to awaken, to become magi, to shape and bend the world to their will. But I feel like vampire comes at a very, I mean, it's easy to embrace. In fact, there's a whole, you know, there's a whole shtick and a whole, like, negativity towards embracing more and more, because as you embrace more, the clan's lineage starts to dilute. You create a caitiff. Like, there's a whole side paradigm to that social stigma of creating new kindred, or Canaanites, or vampires, wherever you want to go. I know a lot of people in the comments, or people in general, will be like, what are you going to call them by? Well, I call them whatever they want to call themselves. You know, if you're part of Sabbat, you call yourselves Canaanites, or vampires, or vamps. And in the Camarilla, you're like, I'm kindred, and I feast on the kind. And then in the Anarchs, they're like, I guess we're kindred, but I don't really care. It's vampire. And so what I'm alluding to is the idea that, like, not everyone who's embraced as a vampire is unique or special or has, like, a grand purpose. Sometimes it's like necessity by numbers, and this is where Wrath's background takes place. Now, I'm gonna leave a lot of things vague, because you, the audience, I still want you guys to kind of, you know, be kind of curious and speculate what entirely his background or his purpose is for this game. But for the most part, I'm gonna go into a little bit of a history on why Wrath is in this chronicle, in this season, and why he's already making a huge splash with Laura's character, and why he feels a certain way he does. So, but I like to always begin with these things with the character sheet. So I gotta minimize it real quick. So I love doing the character creation with you guys. I've already set out what he is. And if you look carefully, let me see. You see in quotations, pander. Now, for all intents and purposes, he is a pander. But there's something more about him that I won't allude to, or I won't answer, but I will leave it up to you guys to kind of, put the pieces together, kind of see where this is coming from, where he comes from, why he is who he is, and all that jazz. So, name, of course, it's Wrath. He used to have a real name, but the idea that I created was, so there's this thing in the Sabbat. It's the Code of Milan. If you don't understand the Code of Milan, well, let's take a look. Let's take a gander at the Code of Milan, right? Open up the good book here, 20th anniversary edition. I cannot wait. This entire weekend, this being the weekend, the second weekend of May, World of Darkness Berlin took place, and there is a lot of news about, 5th edition Vampire that I'm excited for. Storytelling, prelude, chapters, the others. Okay, so where in this book? Because in the LARP book, which I'm intimately familiar with, okay, 2 clans in a sec. The Sabbat. All right, so yeah, these are the strongholds. Actually, I probably should go. I mean, this is for me, but you guys can't really read single page. But I mean, I don't think you guys. I don't know if I'm allowed to put this on YouTube, but we'll see. So this is the Code of Milan, right? And this is it's a little hard to read because of the text, but basically, these rules are kind of like the traditions, except for the Sabbat. It's kind of like they're more of a guidelines, really. Not every Sabbat live up to these standards, and that's kind of what makes the Sabbat a very interesting game, because it is about, rule breaking and freedom. But, in order to, you can't let anarchy is not a society structure that can run. It's the antithesis. Am I saying that right? Antithesis of a structured society. So they kind of have to sort of be like, okay, we have rules, but they're more like guidelines, but you have to adhere by the guidelines, because if we don't, all Sabbat have to honor these guidelines, because if they don't, then, we have to kill that dude who's stepping out of line. So it's more like a military code than the law of the land, natural law and stuff. Sabbat shall remain united in support of the sect regent. The regent is basically the super pope of the Sabbat. He sits at the seat of Cain, the pope / regent of the Sabbat. He does, he hears edicts from Cain. He receives messages like the pope, and as it is earth as is in heaven. What Cain says, comes from the regent. Whatever the regent says comes from Cain himself. Which, if you guys are a fan of all the White Wolf meta plot stuff, you would know that Cain definitely does not speak to this regent. It's all in his, or he does. One of the beautiful things about this 20th anniversary, people who had played, the old World Darkness games, went through Gehenna, the timeline, did End of Days book, there's 3 possible endings. And then at the very end of it, it's hey, you can create your own fucking ending. You can be whatever you want. This is a game. We are cementing the fact that White Wolf promised themselves that they were going to end the Chronicle in a way that when they started, there was the end times were coming, and they were going to do the end times, which ultimately kind of killed them. And so I'm hoping that 5th edition, it only just alludes to the end times. It doesn't really give any plot devices in order to hasten or speed up the end times. I just want that just to kind of be the background, background noise. And I mean, you could always ran this as background noise with the end times and stuff, but I digress. When I talk about White Wolf, I digress a lot. So please keep that in mind. All right, so I'm just going to speed past these rules real quick, just to kind of set up what Wrath is and what the whole point of all this is. All Sabbats shall do their best to serve their leaders, as long as they say leaders serve the will of the regent. Of course. All Sabbat faithful to observe the Octorius Rite, the main rites, Benicula or Valdery, Monomacy, the sermons, stuff like that. All Sabbat shall keep their word and honor to one another. That's definitely one of the guideline things. Not every Sabbat does that. And that, that one gets you in trouble. Let's see, that could get you in trouble. And this is going to be a theme. It's like why the 7, they got in trouble. They're not like, even though they have a really high position in the Sabbat, it's more like I relate it to Halo 2's the Arbiter. How the Arbiter was just a title given to, I forget his name, the Covenant alien general dude, but because he was given the title Arbiter, because he was essentially supposed to die. He was supposed to be, he was supposed to die as a martyr, but it turns out he ended up not dying as a martyr. He got branded. He ended up finding the truth about the Covenant and like the rings and stuff like that, and so he kept, for whatever reason, he kept the name Arbiter. But, he held it in esteem as a title. He's like, look, I'm the Arbiter. And that's what the 7 are. They are titles more so than, like, what they go by. Because Sabbat, they have this hazing ritual where you become true Sabbat. You kind of lose your slave name, like the name given to you as a mortal, and you adopt this new persona, like Vikos, who's the head Priscus. But when I read Vikos, he's always been Vikos, which is weird, but that's just White Wolf writing. Gotta come up with crazy, unique names. Anyways, all Sabbat shall treat their peers fairly and equally, upholding the strengths and the unity of the Sabbat. If necessary, they shall provide for the needs of their brethren. Guidelines. More guidelines. All Sabbat must put the good of the sect and the race of Canaanites before their own personal needs, despite all costs. Big guidelines right there. And one of the reasons is because, and this we'll all talk about with other members of the 7, that rule is the one that, like, a lot of them broke. Putting their own needs before the sect of the Sabbat, that gets some people a lot of trouble. And sometimes that's kind of like the self-destruction mechanism of the Sabbat, where it's like the Sabbat observes freedom, but you can't pursue your personal freedom to the nth degree, or you get toasted. You greet the sun, they murder you, and that's kind of hard, especially when you try to track down a spiritual path, the alternate path of enlightenment. A lot of those paths kind of tell you, hey, you need to put your own needs above everything else, because if you want, it's like Buddhism. It's like being a preacher, right? You gotta go like celibacy. You gotta, you are married to God like a nun, right? You can't, your needs are no longer your needs. They're the needs of God. And so sometimes a lot of that personal belief gets tied up into, personal freedom. And that's what a lot of members of the sect kind of fall through. All Sabbat must put... Oh, yeah, I already read that. Those who are not honorable under the code will be considered less than equal and therefore unworthy of assistance. So, like the cast, they are all considered unworthy. They're not recognized as true Sabbat. So that's why they're never really considered... they're like less than, they're dog shit for the most part. But... if you can tell, there's definitely a lot of, like, especially with Detective Cooper and Lust, there's a little bit of coddling there. Greed is definitely taking that to heart. He definitely loves the hazing of, like, the new Canaanites in the sect, which is getting him a lot of, like, slack, because there's a sense that's the thing, right? In the Sabbat, you create new Canaanites for the sake of shock value. They're called shovelheads, and I always love using this term because it's a little offensive, and I understand that, but it's just funny to me because it's like the best way to describe what they are. It's like you load all these new Canaanites, vampires, onto a short bus, you wrap it in, propane tanks, and you just launch them in. You just create instantaneous shock troops. They have no idea what they are. They have no idea what's going on. And at that point, they're just, raving mad monsters with their beasts in Rostrek. And they're just like, rah, and just going nuts. And so now, with this game, they're having to do a more, one-on-one basis. And that pisses off a lot of the members of the Seven, because they were raised in a manner that was the old school Sabbat, tried and true shovel-heading way. And then there were some who are like, oh, I was born into this, or I was destined for this. So there's definitely a middle ground that this game is finding with the introduction of this new tact of recruiting people into Sabbat. It has always been and shall be always the Alex Lion's son shall be the model of the undying justice, and by which all. I'm gonna be honest. I forget what that term. I'm gonna Google that term real quick. I need to remember what exactly. I think if I can pull out of my 31-year-old mind, trying to remember relationship. Blah, 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 blah. I know it's Lex Talionis. Oh god, I was like, Lex Talionis. I was like, what? Why is Lex Talionis? If you don't know what Lex Talionis means, it's an eye for an eye. So basically, anything you do in the Sabbat, you got to back it up, right? So if you kill somebody in the Sabbat, by that law, you are forfeiting your life, and your life can be ended as well. God, I forgot about Lex Talionis. Well, I mean, I know what Lex Talionis is, but reading out loud and reading it in my head, I suffer from mild dyslexia. So I was like, Lex Talionis? Oh, Lex Talionis, because it's Latin. So Lex Talionis, it's basically the ultimate, it's eye for an eye. It's whatever you do in the Sabbat, you got to do it yourself. And if you whatever problems you cause, those problems will come back on you as well. All Sabbats shall protect one another from the enemies of the sect. Personal enemies shall remain a personal responsibility unless it undermines the sect's security. That is also another guideline thing, because sometimes the enemy to the sect is a personal enemy depending on how old you are, or maybe the enemy you evolve into becomes a personal enemy, but it's still the enemy of the sect. Anyway, that's kind of anybody who's not part of the Sabbat is the enemy of the Sabbat, right? You're either with us or you're against us sort of mentality. So that's kind of a moment. All sect members shall protect Sabbat territory or all their powers. That's pretty self-explanatory. The spirit of freedom shall be the fundamental principle of the sect. All Sabbat shall expect and demand freedom from the leaders. That one gets a little dicey sometimes. The riotous anonymity shall be used to settle disputes among all Sabbats. So anonymity is typically a duel to the death, but there are other creative endeavors. It's just it's the might makes right challenge of the Sabbat. So you could do a philosophical right anonymity. You can do a trivia buzz thing. It could be anything, but typically right anonymity is two kindreds going into the cage. One, two come in, one come out, sort of thing. And there's a whole process to it. You elect the arbiter, not the arbiter, but the moderator or the mediator. You find a mediator. You can, if you're somebody who's not really combat, you can select the champion. Sometimes people of higher office, they have their own personal Templar, or they have their own personal, their Ductus, who's their pack leader. They can nominate them in their stead. And depending on how the terms go from the moderator, they can determine what the exact punishment is, or if it is to the death or not. But that's way more things I was explaining about. All Sabbats shall support the Black Hand. Now The addendums basically also have the right to monitor, because that's like I said, like once personal freedoms get kind of dicey, you know, then you have people kind of going into the you know, in the fringes of the Sabbat, who are like completely in their own ecosystem and their own thought bubble, and you know, they just do crazy shit because that's what Sabbats do. If you let a monster in their own dwellings, in their own mindscape for hundreds of years, they're gonna lose sight of like the focus, the prime initiative, which is kill the antediluvians, rule the world, true freedom. Camarilla must be destroyed. So, and that's what's happened to this area of Kern County, that there was a Sabbat at one point, and then they just kind of got lost on the fringes. So, all Sabbat possess the right to call a council of their peers to initiate and mediate leaders. So you could basically, if you have a problem in the Sabbat, it's almost like that, like the whole whitehouse.org thing. You can ask the question to the White House, and you could get a official response of somebody who was in charge of that, or you could file a petition, and somebody within the government could, you know, either fulfill that petition or they can just ignore it, which turned out that was like the biggest joke of Obama's administration, having that site open, people with the dumbest requests. And that's kind of how the Sabbat kind of treats us too. Like, even though you can be like, hey Regent, I have a problem. I do not like the way you handle this situation of the invasion of Miami, and I want you to listen to me and hear what I have to say, and blah 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 blah. And the Sabbat kind of go, whatever. We don't have time to deal with you. So that's definitely an addendum that's kind of like they acknowledge it, but nobody really, in practice, nobody. Loyalists, which are a faction within the Sabbat, they implemented that in because that's all they got. They were like, well, this is not the Camarilla. We shouldn't be ignored. You know, even though you're an archbishop or you're the Priscus of the region, or you're the region yourself, like you should hear everyone's problems. If everybody has a problem within the sect, they should be heard. And the higher, older vampires are like, yeah, okay, sure, fine, we'll just add this to the addendum. And then lastly, all Sabbat shall act against sect members who use the power and authority of Sabbat given to them by personal gain as an expense of the Sabbat. Action shall be taken throughout accepting means approval by the quorum of the Priscus. So that one is a big one because you got old vampires who are older than the Sabbat, who were one of the first ones to create the Sabbat, and then they decided to run it like Camarilla Light. And so many of the younger vampires who were who were a little bit more observant, and they were like, hey, wait, look, listen, I'm not trying to say this is a bad thing, but why is everybody kind of acting like the Camarilla when we go to these like big gatherings? Like, why are the old vampires kind of, scheming and plotting over there while we're doing all the heavy lifting, trying to keep the sect going? And that's what that addendum is. Basically, like, you can't use the Sabbat as your own personal, like, plot device. So, yeah. So, how does this all relate to Wrath? Basically, at some point, this Wrath individual broke one of those laws. And I won't go in which one it is, but to give you kind of like a little bit of a backstory on Wrath, Wrath was not born into the Sabbat. Wrath was adopted into Sabbat, and for many reasons. One, he has a history with the Camarilla. He was originally Anarch, but he was the lowest on the totem pole when it came to Anarchs. Now the Anarchs, I can go more and more into like Anarch structure, but I don't want to. I've already spent like a good 15 minutes explaining the structure and the Code of Milan. So I don't want to go into like another layer of like set structure. But basically you have a baron who is kind of like a prince, but is not. It's kind of like the big honcho of the anarchs, right? And so Wrath belonged to this gang, this motley of anarchs, and he was the youngest, and he was the most picked on. He was the one that was like, okay, I have to do all the rules, I have to do all the house cleaning, I have to go around, do all the bitch work, find all the like dumb young mortals to bring to back to my crew. They feed on them, I get like the leftovers. I have to do all the, clean up. If one of them decides to drain one dry, I have to go out, bury the body. That was Wrath's job in the Sabbat. And including that, he was also, his sire and his packmates were all his brothers, and essentially they were all the same clan. Now, were they all panders / Cadis? I'm not going to go into that, but what I am going to go into is the nature and demeanor of Wrath. Wrath was, growing up, he was a bit of a nerd, but he wasn't like the nerd that you and I know. He grew up in like, kind of like the 60s, the communist Red Scare, Nixon, all that stuff. And so, he was like, he wanted to go to Vietnam. He wanted to fight the red, the commies and stuff. And those, the Charlie in the tree sort of thing. But if you look at him, right? Oh, sorry. If you look at him, he's not the most fit guy. So he what's the term? What's it called? Not qualified for the army. Let's see. Qualified. Shit. Spell qualified. Qualified.
Qualified. Officially recognized as being trained to perform a particular job. Certified.
Not qualified for the army. I forget what the term is. I'm sorry. What is the term? Anyways, I'm gonna look that up. Term and slang. What is 84? 48? Trying to see where like you get 86. I don't know, but that was he couldn't. So, but it didn't matter. He still, in his spare time, he would go to like these sort of like reenactments, like Civil War reenactments during his youth. And so he trained himself to be a soldier, and then but never passed the physical in order to become a soldier. And that's all he ever wanted. All he ever wanted to be was a soldier and fight for his country and, to fight the communist scare. So that's Wrath's personality. So we're going to go, his nature is definitely, he's always been somebody that was driven with the goal. So I'm going to go, his nature's always been soldier. So, but his demeanor, on the other hand, he's always been like, he's like an ROTC nerd. That's what type of nerd he is. He wasn't into computers or science fiction. He was just like the military otaku, right? He just loved, he knew all the planes, he knew every type of gun, he knew like obscure military facts about like during the Pacific campaign during World War II. Like that was his jam. That's what got him going. So nature is soldier. Demeanor, now he's a bit of an enthusiast. He likes what he does, and so he's constantly talking about like what is like, oh, did you know about this? Like, oh, I like this gun has like a, I'm not really a military nerd, so I do apologize. So like he's like, oh, like this is like the best model, it has like the slide health, like quick reload, you know, it's like the newest model. He's a gallant for sure. Yeah, he definitely wanted to be in the spotlight. He wanted to be Captain America when he was young. So he's always had that sort of like, oh yeah, like this is what we're all about. We're all about. All right, so we're gonna go with low physicals. He has a lot of charisma, but no manipulation or appearance. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. And he's not really smart. He's just really, he just pays attention a lot, and he regurgitates things. He memorizes things. And memorization is not necessarily how thoughtful you are, but how perceptive and witful you are. Just being able to regurgitate what you learn and kind of put it into habit. He's like, oh yeah, like that's like, if he grew up, well, he's in the internet age now, but like if he was alive during the internet age, he would just be like the mini Google, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So very witty, very perceptive, not really all that smart. And that's kind of what the other thing too, that he could have landed a kind of like a desk job in the military, but he wasn't smart enough to actually do that either. And even though he was committed, he could have studied, he just couldn't implement that. Like it, there's a difference, right? Like I know World of Darkness. I know role-playing games. I'm because I'm jazzed about it. I borderline obsess about these games and the world-building aspects and the meta lore and the plots and all this stuff. That like I'm committed to this, but it's not because of memory. It's because it's like a part of me. It's a love that I have. But I couldn't do that same commitment to be like a game designer. Like I wouldn't know where to begin to even write the rules of a new game system. Like I have a few ideas. I've always had this inkling of like, okay, if I were to make a game, what type of game would it be? But I don't have the discipline or the knowledge to create systems and rules and discipline for it. I'm more of a fanatic, and that's what kind of Wrath is. Wrath is a fanatic to the whole idea of military exploration. He's not like the genius at it. He's just the fanatic of it. All right, so 1395. So we definitely going to put a lot of talents. I find to be the very most important aspect of any of these three ability trees, because there's just a lot of personality in talents. That's where you're going to get a lot of the interaction portion of the game. And then skills are definitely like your focus on like what type of person you are, like mechanically. And then I find knowledge to be kind of always tertiary, because everybody knows what they want to know, but everybody doesn't. I don't know anybody on the planet that has like 5 and like 4 of these skills. They maybe have 5 and like 2 of these skills. Definitely like computers and finances, or maybe law and finances, or maybe academics and law, or medicine and finances. But you're never going to see somebody with like 5 in science, 5 in technology, 5 in medicine, 5 in computers, 5 in academics. That's just impossible. Like I don't know anybody who is like a brilliant surgeon, genius programmer, who on his spare time can compete with Wall Street and has a philosophical paper on like the meaning of man and suffering. Like that's impossible. And that's why I kind of hate this category. I kind of hate knowledge. And during these sessions, I'll tell you, like, knowledge is, if I were to retool the knowledge section, like, I would definitely add like I would definitely get rid of knowledges and just keep skills and talents. And then knowledge would be its own, like, sort of like, okay, you just have this pool of information and you just choose 5 things that you want to know because you can't know them all. You can't have all these knowledges at 5. It's your brain. We've only been able to comprehend 10% of our human brain, and a brain cannot comprehend all these knowledges at once. Now, if you're a mage, maybe you can, but maybe because you have like a super brain, or you have a built-in computer in your head, or the spirits guide your very knowledge through reincarnation or ancestral, osmosis or whatever. But that's neither here or there. I digress. So, alertness 1, 2, athletics 1, awareness 1, 2, brawl definitely a 3. Because even though he is a wimp, he definitely is like he's always been angry. He's always been an angry guy because of the way he's been treated and the way he's been, kind of looked down upon, with his dad being, a big disappointment, not being able to go in the army and not really going anywhere from that point. And then, people around him kind of making fun of him for the fact that he's just like, he wants to act super macho. He wants to be like the Captain America light dude, but, they just make fun of him. So he's the first one to throw the punch to, prove that he's a man's man. So he's gotten a lot of fights. He has 0 empathy, and I'll go into another reason why. Expression, yeah. Intimidation, yeah, barely. No leadership whatsoever. Leadership, that's one of the things that, once again, he's very charismatic. He's very loud, and he's very open-ended. He's an open book when it comes to his feelings and his ideas and what he loves. But he doesn't really know how to like connect with people and kind of be like, yeah, you need to do this and this and this, because he doesn't want to necessarily be the person to kind of tell people what to do. He wants to be the one being told what to do, and doesn't necessarily want anybody to, rely on him for guidance. Definitely some streetwise and definitely some subterfuge. He's lied a lot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 11, 12, 13. Yeah. So he's definitely a liar. He's definitely an exaggerator. He likes to exaggerate things because it makes him feel better about like whatever shitty circumstance he is. Like, oh yeah, like I totally went on this base and I got to fire this gun. And since he has that knowledge, it almost is believable. So there are certain instances where manipulation subterfuge is the go-to, but I would like to argue that charisma subterfuge, if you can exaggerate something, you're not necessarily manipulating somebody to believe you, you're just creating a scenario where you come off as believable, almost like a performance, almost like roleplay. Remember that. That's a good lesson. It's almost like roleplay. Anyways, skills. All right, definitely has firearms 3. He has a very extensive knowledge. Goes to the fire range all the time. He knows how to drive. He can craft. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He knows survival. 7, 8. He knows how to break into things. 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, 13, 9, 5. And then 5. He knows a lot of history. He knows like field medicine. He knows computers. And by the way, I'm only building a character out, but we're gonna basically fill in the dots as soon as he becomes a vampire and the history of him. So these are just kind of like the base, like what his stats were when he became a vampire in the Anarchs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's it. That's all he has. Like, probably might have a little bit of technology or science, but really he's just all about. And like I said, he's obsessive, so he has this extensive knowledge. He's done the research. He's read books. He's just not bright. He's just not a smart guy to kind of like, dictate his own opinions or write about the facts in a way that aren't just quotes and regurgitation. It's all about like just committing things to memory that he's read or researched and then regurgitating them. But he doesn't really have his own voice. And that's going to be his theme, is he doesn't have a voice. He's somebody who wants to just be in the background, but he also secretly wants the spotlight. He wants to be like the unsung hero, the hero that like that you don't really need, but it's the hero that you depend on. You know, you always ask for, but it's the thankless hero sort of scenario. I digress. All right, so we're going to give him some powers. And the first power is going to be, where is it? Potence. Copy. Copy. Because potence, it's always good discipline. Potence. And then he has presence. Pander, presence, potence. And then he has a power that I'm just going to call pants. He has a pants power. And you're saying to yourself, Michael, why does he have a pants power? Because I'm the storyteller and I'm not going to tell you. That's basically why. For all intents and purposes, he has the power pants. So, but he always didn't have power pants. He used to have a power called shorts. He used to have a power called shorts, but then it turned into pants. And a lot of you who are like super duper hardcore vampire nerds, you're going to know exactly what I'm going with. I'm not really hiding this, especially with the two powers right there. But for the people who are just like novices and don't really understand what's going on, but you just like the role play and the interaction, this is important because he used to have shorts, but then became pants. So when he started off, he got one in each. He got one in potence, one in presence, and one in shorts. He had shorts, but then turned to pants. And I'll go into that later. Is it 3? Let me kind of, I always forget how many disciplines you start off with. Yep, 3 disciplines. 5 backgrounds. Now, 5 backgrounds, he only has, as far as the backgrounds are concerned, he only has generation. He has a generation of 1. So this is going to be 12th gen / 9th. And that is because he does something to get to that point. He does something to get to 9th gen, and I'll explain that later. So he starts at 12th, but then he gets to 9th. At the end of this storyteller section, I will tell you why he gets to 9th. And like I said, for the hardcore fans out there who knows everything about vampire, you're going to know already. But this is for the new people who don't understand vampire, people who are just curious to know what vampire is. So, Generations 1, he definitely has some contacts. He has some ROTC buddies who actually did go off and become, you know, people in the armies in Vietnam, and they came back with severe depression and war fatigue before it was called PTSD. They always came up with all these terms like fatigue or shock or mental breakdowns, but it was basically what we finally clinically diagnosed it as after the Afghan conflict. So he has a few contacts there. Some buddies who still have connection with military grade weaponry and military grade munitions, or may or may not know where to get a hold of some, illegal explosives. Because that's how it was. That's how it was back then, right? I mean, a great movie I can reference in this age, in this period, is American Crime with Denzel Washington. Great setting. That's where he came from. This is where, or Born on the 4th of July with Tom Cruise. That's the era that Wrath takes place in. Right? So now, and also, let's see, what sort of, and we're gonna give him like, we're gonna give him resources 1, right? Because he has like a side business where he does like cut salons and shit, or he did at the time. Eventually, that that resources will grow because he ends up furthering his own ability to connect with gun control and gun trafficking, and that's gonna grow. But that's for the most part as he was plucked from his mortal coil and turned into a pander, quote unquote. So yeah. So now we go in the conscious. He has a lot of courage. He is a lot of conscious, but no self-control. He's a little bit low on the self-control part. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So he has a lot of conscious, no self-control, a lot of courage. He's ready to fight for his country at this point, but he's not really all there. He's just completely just like all his actions are justified. He wants to be, he wanted to be the one to like win the day when it comes to the what's it called? The commie threat. But he never got his time to shine, sadly, unfortunately. So, where does this leave us at? Okay, so we got the virtues. Now his humanity is at 6, but that's gonna go down. His willpower is 4, so, and that's it. This is the base character. Now, this is a pander. He's a pander at this point, hanging out with the anarchs. Goes through the induction, what kindred society's like, gets roped into a gang, a motley, and then from that point on, he just becomes their bitch for, I don't know. Let's see. Movie. Is it American Crime movie? Is it Un-American Crime? What's that movie with Denzel Washington? Oh, is it American Gangster? It's American Gangster. That's who it is. God, I can't believe I forgot. I thought it was American Crime, not American Gangster. Yeah, so I'm trying to find out when this takes place at. The timeline. This is like really bad. Killing all this. Oh, 1969. Frank Lucas, right-hand man, Harlem gangster. Edward Bumpy Johnson. When Johnson dies of heart attack, Lucas takes over the Harlem crime scene. So around the 60s, 70s era. Lucas buys blue magic directly from producers in Thailand and smuggles them to the USA, returning Vietnam War servicemen, which is really fucked up, but that was kind of like, that's pretty fucking gangster, if you ask me. So throughout the 70s, all the way to the mid-90s, basically, Wrath was the Anarch's Motley's bitch. And so they would roam around from, Texas to eventually New Mexico, going up into Nevada, and then finally into California, because California was the great promised land for all anarchs. It was the anarch-free state during the 90s, where the original vampire setting took place. And so They came through, they moved around California a lot, hanging down in, Los Angeles, moving up to the Bay, moving down to Oakland, going down to South Bay, moving to Central Valley. So they've been a gang that didn't really lay down roots, but they were just constantly moving around until Wrath had enough. One day, Wrath had seen what he had been through. Like I said, always never in the spotlight, never wanting to, forge his own destiny, something kind of triggered in him. Something made him want to stand up and say no. And so he did. And so he stood up, he said no. He constantly battled with his anarch brothers, and he would be laid down. He'd be laid the fuck out every single time. And finally, the powers that be, the laws of causality, as I like to put it, something in him one day spoke to him. And it wasn't like a voice. It's not like somebody was in his mind telling him what to do, but he had a feeling, had an inkling, like a dark whisper in the seeds of his undead heart, told him to lash out and to take what was important to him, which was his freedom. And so he did. And so one by one, he deobliterized his brothers. And not because he wanted power, it's just that he knew he was chasing something deep inside of him. There was a fire that was burning inside of him, constantly burning, but it wasn't like a good burning. It was like something that was destroying him from the inside. And the only way, he wanted to burst. He wanted this fire to like rage out of control and consume him, so he could just get that final like bliss of like, it's done. I am finally free from like this torment that I put myself through. So he does all that, gets through, destroys his entire pack, or not pack, his motley. And then, he's there, sitting there after he's consumed all their souls, consumed his sire's sire, and then eventually consumed, the motley leader. And he's just there, just in complete catharsis, complete just, swelling with like the souls of these people who have made his last 30 years on planet Earth as a kindred the most vile, the worst. And he nothing comes to mind. Never a great moment, never a moment of like brotherhood and solidarity, what the anarchs were all about. And somebody was looking at all this. Somebody was kind of paying attention to all this, because the Sabbat were around as well. Pride saw this and was like, huh, this guy has nothing to lose. He's completely without any semblance of hope. He's completely lost. And I think this is a perfect time to kind of wrangle him in, because he's already committed diablerie. He's not going to find any solace with the Camarilla. He's not going to find any solace with the Anarchs, because his gang, his motley he was a part of, kind of built this reputation for themselves as, badasses. And so now that they've gone and disappeared and he's the only one left alive at this point, they're going to question him. They're going to question his, what exactly happened. So Pride, being Pride at the time, finds him, and then automatically knows, because of his third eye, because he's being salubary and all. It's kind of like a little hint there. He understands something inside of Wrath that's way more important, and he discovers something more about Wrath than he even believed he was. And so he brings him to the Regent, tells the Regent how important Wrath is, but he's too dangerous left to his own, freedom. Like, he can never be alone in the Sabbat. He can never go on his own. He automatically has to fall into some sort of hierarchy, some sort of, oversight, because if Wrath was left to his own demise, he will, he can destroy the sect from within. And that's when his shorts become pants. And that's the big thing. Is it like what Pride discovers in Wrath is that the ability, normally he would have shorts, but he has pants now. And that automatically sends out the warning signals for pride to tell the regent he needs to be part of the seven. He needs to be overlooked. He has to be watched. He has to be studied. He has to be monitored. But let me do all of it. Let me welcome him in. Let me bring him into the fold. And like it'll work to our benefit. So that happens. So now we're gonna do the part where we're just start adding dots to things, because that's what I am. So eventually, many years after being part of the Anarchs, he grew a little bit of he grew some strength, even though it doesn't look like it. A little bit of manipulation, and he just becomes a lot more willful. That's it. That's all he got. Obviously, his brawl went up. His athletics definitely went up. Still no empathy. Never had empathy. Has some expression. Has some intimidation. More streetwise. Not much on the subterfuge though. His drive went up. No etiquette. Firearms definitely went up. Larceny went up. He doesn't fuck with melee. Survival went up. Not really on the stealth end. And all this, his science went way up. And then his technology went up. His computers went up. Actually, yeah, like there. But that's about it. Doesn't do any investigation. There's no need for medicine. No politics. The science portion, actually, you know what? I should probably lower this. It's more the crafts. You know, he becomes like the Unabomber, right? He just goes into full, like, I'm gonna just create things of mass destruction. And that's like kind of the Sabbat. It gives him this freedom to just kind of fuck around and give all this sort of like exploration, and be like, I'm gonna craft a device that you saw in the first episode, which was the blender, the juicer, vampire juicer, where you stick this blender into a vampire and it just starts chopping them up, and he just shoves them in with his potence and just blends them, and it's sharp enough and it's fast enough where, you know, vampires, they're soft, they're mushy, their bones are not as hard as, you know. That's why when you stake a vampire, it's, you know, you aim for the heart. It's easy. You crack the rib cage, you know, you torpor them. They're not malleable. They're not like hard and dense. I mean, some are, especially with fortitude. But I digress. But yeah, computers. He, you know, he creates the web, security access, science, technology. He starts understanding certain things. That's where he's going with. Obviously, generation stays the same, but he diablerizes his way down. Obviously, his contacts goes up, his resources go up. He gets allies within the military community. So a lot of the stuff that you're gonna see with the military stuff is basically all Wrath. Wrath is the guy behind, you know, getting all these firearms, getting all this like emissions to wage war in Kern County. And there so happens to be an Air Force base and an experimental Navy base in the county, and then neighboring other military facilities around California that he has access to. Doesn't need fame, doesn't do rituals, doesn't do status. He has unique status though, which is Wrath. He's part of the Seven. He doesn't know how to do any of the riot. He doesn't believe in that shit. He sort of does, but he doesn't really care. He doesn't have influence, doesn't have contacts, definitely not part of Black Hand, not alter identity. Alright, so he does have a little bit of fortitude because of who he is diablerized in the past. He got a little bit of fortitude, and he's gotten obtenebration from lust, but only one, because he was like, I want to be able to play with shadows, and so lust kind of gave him like this sort of like, hey, you could play around with shadows, but that's pretty much it. No Protean, no Quietus. Lust would not teach him that. Vicissitude not be taught. Necromancy would not be taught. Not obfuscate. No. Oh, and he does have aspects though. Does have aspects. All right, so presence. Just 2. Potence, 5. Pants, 5. Fortitude, 3. Obtenebration, 1. Aspects, 2. That's a lot of power. lot of potence, a lot of pants. He's got lots in pants because of when he had shorts. He had a really cool ability in shorts. Now, as far as merits and flaws go, he does have a unique merit. I'm gonna call it the good pants. He has a merit that specifically ties to the pants power, and it's called the good pants. And that's really it. Wrath's personality, his background, where he comes from, I think we've kind of laid it out. His future, is basically, trying to ensure the Sabbat's victory. He definitely sees a lot of the hazing. He's a loyalist to a fault. He doesn't really necessarily agree with the hazing because of, the 30 odd years he was hazed forever being in the Anarchs. He sees the Sabbat as like the pinnacle of how, vampires being this alpha superior. Oh, by the way, I should probably he got his willpower up by 1, but his humanity definitely dropped. He's a good 4. He's definitely like a good 4. Little bit of hints out there, guys. A little bit of hints. I told you guys about 0 empathy. You could probably figure out why that's the way it is. He has the pants power. And then potence, presence, obtembration, aspects. Yeah, that's about it. Hope you guys enjoyed. I don't really have anything else to say besides his, he doesn't have like a fancy for any character yet because he's unfeeling and uncaring. He only cares about the mission. The mission is what's important. The Sabbat to him is like the ultimate goal in order to achieve not his dream anymore, but to kind of get revenge on vampire society. He's like, I never wanted this, so I'm going to join the Sabbat and I want to burn it all down because I was a victim of causality, and the Sabbat is going to give me that revenge. The Sabbat are going to allow me to continue and do what I love, which is cause carnage and chaos. But the end goal for him is that he just wants it all to burn down because he never got what he wanted in life. And when he became a vampire, he never really got to explore the whole prominent of rising to greatness that he'd assume vampires would. He was always considered, to be disposable, leftover, exploited. And that fury burned in him, and it burned himself out to where now it's all that's left is like this cold husk of like just vengeance and just self-destruction in the ways of like destroying everything around him and then himself sort of attitude. So if you saw me roleplay those bits where he just kind of like stares off into the nothingness and kind of not really explaining his actions, but kind of just acting on impulse because he doesn't feel anything. Nothing inside of him even ticks anymore. He's just, he wants it all to be laid to waste. So, anywho, thank you guys so much for being here. I had a great time doing this character development. The next one, I think, will be Pride, because I had mentioned Pride previously in this storyteller section, why Pride fits into the story and why Pride is important to the game. And yeah, that's going to be a fun one. I have a lot of, and I know there's a lot of storytellers or GMs or DMs that will say like, you shouldn't invest so much into your NPCs. They're just set pieces. But I find some of them are set pieces. Like Gluttony is definitely a set piece. Sloth is definitely a set piece. Lust, for all intents and purposes, is a set piece. But there are certain NPCs that I kind of take, ownership of because they're probably concepts I never will get to play, or concepts I'll never really get to explore because of the time and place in my life right now, where I'm like, I want to play all the games, I want to do all the things, but I'm confounded to where I live, what I do, who I play with, organizations I want to work with. Those things, the human element of it all won't allow me to fully explore the potential of something I want to create or play as. So this gives me a way to kind of filter that sort of like desire in a way that I'm like, I still get to quasi play them the way I think they should play, but also gives me wiggle room to kind of go like, oh, well, I'm glad this worked out the way it did as an NPC, because the way he would act and the way he would react to the certain things going on would be the way I would want to play him. So it helps me like solidify that draw of like, these NPCs are not like complete set pieces. They have personality. They have goals. They have purpose. And the one rule though, it took me a long time to learn this, which was, even though I have all this devotion and all this emotional tied, ness to the NPCs, they should never overshadow the players at all. So sometimes I fall into those bad habits, but I'm only human, and so I hope that you guys let me know if that's why the whole point of Storyteller Section is a way for me to filter out that sort of, I don't have to explain this during the player's time. This is my time to explain to you, the audience, why this NPC acts the way it is, why it's doing the way it is, why its stats are the way they are. And then you can comment on it, whether it's like, oh, well, we don't like the fact that you added like all these dots at the end of the story. Like, maybe you should explain more, or like, give me suggestions how the Storyteller Section should pan out. Because for those who are watching early, you pay to get this at patreon.com/outofordershow. You paid to get early access to this, so maybe you guys should be the one to kind of comment first on why these Storyteller Section should go. Maybe they should go in a more constructive criticism, maybe more backstory. Who knows? Or maybe you like the way it goes. Either way, I'm open for suggestion on these, but this is kind of like how I've been doing them for the most part. So, anyways, thank you so much. For those who are watching early access, thank you so much for supporting at the $2 level. I put these out weekly, and then they go for free at the end of the month. As well, we have other we have other Patreon tier goals. The one-on-one RPG section, which is a monthly exclusive for each character, as well as, you can be part of the show, shout-outs, Storyteller Section Hangout, where you, the audience, can be a part of the Hangout session, maybe give your live commentary right then and there, instead of leaving in the comments, or maybe you have a suggestion on how the plot or the narrative or the NPC should act, and I will take that into consideration. So, either way, thank you guys so much. I had a blast. Hopefully, I will see you on the next Storyteller Section. Either way, thank you, and take care.